Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing. And today, we've definitely got a very interesting combination to try out, and it's one that one of you guys suggested that we test. And really, I don't know what we're going to see, because this might work out fantastic, it might completely ruin the whole pattern, I really don't know. But as for the shells I brought today, I got out some of these, the Winchester Super X buckshot loads. They are a 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 16 pellet load of 1 buck, moving about 1,250 feet per second. And we have tested these once or twice on the channel so far with, from what I remember, is pretty mediocre results at best. So I don't know, maybe today's choke combo might really help them out, but it could absolutely ruin our performance as well. But as for that setup, I brought out my Remington 1187 here with a 28-inch barrel and this choke, which is the Carlson's Coyote choke. Now this is interesting because this Coyote choke measures out at a 665 constriction. So it's essentially a turkey choke, and they don't claim anything about 1 buck, but they do say it performs well with 4 buck, T-shot, and BB. But one of you guys wanted to see some 1 buck through it, so who knows, maybe this is the perfect constriction that these need to perform good. Maybe it's too tight and it's going to blow our pattern wide open. I really don't know. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards, I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity from the shell, and I've got the templates that we can lay up over our results as well. So let's get you guys a view of that target and see how these 1 buck Super X shells can perform through a 665 Coyote choke. Is it going to be too tight and blow our pattern open, or is it going to actually help them out and be what they really like? I don't know, but let's go take our shot and see what kind of pattern it gives us. Alright, so that shell gave us 1221 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1250, so we were just a little bit short of that, but honestly 1221 is perfectly fine for this load. So looking pretty good up here for velocity, but what kind of a pattern did they give us down at 40? And was that choke too tight, and did it ruin our pattern? I don't know yet, but let's go down and take a look and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and we definitely got some pretty interesting results here. Now, for a reference, the white dot was my point of aim. The paper's 36 inches wide by about 44 inches tall, and we did have all 16 pellets on the paper here, which is what you see on your screen, and it's definitely a little bit stringy and splotchy and stuff. We kind of had a group of them up here at the top with a little string off to the right and another little string down there off the bottom, so it's definitely not a pretty spread of pellets. And I did measure the farthest 2 points across, which is pretty much straight up and down there, gave us right at a 20 3/4 inch spread at 40 yards. So definitely not too bad on the overall size of the spread. It's just not a very even looking pattern. And seeing as how kind of stringy and blotchy this is, it's probably going to be a little bit inconsistent as well. You might have a little more even of a spread on one, and the next one might be just one straight string of them. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're probably at or a little over the constriction limit for these shells. 665 is a straight up turkey choke type of constriction, and although it didn't give us a terrible result here today for a pattern, I think these would probably much prefer a little bit more open of a choke. Maybe something like an extra full in the 680-ish range might really dial these in a little bit more evenly, but it definitely could have been worse for today as well. We've seen way worse results out of very oddball combinations like this before, and honestly, I think that might be the tightest spread that we've seen out of these shells at 20 3/4 inches. So somewhere in the middle. Overall size isn't bad, but it's just not perfectly even as well. But I guess let's throw a couple templates up and get a little better reference as to how they look in a more real life scenario as compared to just a blank sheet of paper. So first up here is our 10-inch circle, and if we put it in the middle of our pattern where our core should have been, we had 4 out of the 16 pellets within there at 40 yards, so a quarter of the load. Definitely nothing impressive as far as a core goes, that's for sure, but you can see we're really not much larger than the template either way. We have a couple little sporadic ones around the edges, but everything else that we're missing is kind of behind the template, so that just shows that it is a little stringy and not super even as well, which we already knew. So not perfect as for a core, but let's throw an actual animal template up and see what this shot would have looked like if you would have taken it out on a hunt. So here's our deer template, and if we line it up with our point of aim, you would have had somewhere in the ballpark of 13-ish pellets that would have hit the deer. So definitely a dead deer all day long here. I mean, that little clump of 4 of them right through the spine there probably would have dropped him right where he stood. So you do have 3/4 of your load actually hitting the deer here, which is more than enough to get the job done, but it's definitely not an even spread as well. You can definitely see there where we have a string through the neck and a string back through the lungs and lower abdomen area and stuff. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't know how consistent this pattern would be with this particular load and choke combo. As stringy and splotchy as that is, it may kind of be completely random. You might get a bigger pattern, a smaller pattern, stringy, blotchy, I don't know. So overall, seems to be good enough to take out on a deer hunt, but it wouldn't be my first choice because of how stringy it actually is. So now let's switch over to the hog template, which will be a little bit smaller sized animal as well. I think it's pretty much going to be the same thing, but we'll at least take a peek at it real quick. So here's our hog template, and like I suspected, it is pretty much the same deal. Absolutely good enough to get you a hog with it all day long, but definitely not an even spread once again. And for you predator hunters that maybe might want to use this shell for coyotes or something, or if you're on a deer hunt and get the chance at a coyote or something, they would be just a little bit smaller than this hog template. So yeah, you would have a good enough pattern for those guys as well out to 40 yards. And even if you only hit them with a couple of those 1-buck pellets at 40 yards, that's going to be a death sentence for a coyote. So overall here today, I guess it's pretty mixed results, which definitely kind of makes sense. It's a very basic load of 1 buck going through a pretty tight 665 choke like that, even though it is a predator choke, quote unquote. So this kind of could have gone either way. It could have blew our pattern wide open. It could have given us a really nice tight looking pattern. And I think we pretty much split the difference. We definitely tightened up a few pellets up here at the top, but we had some strings as well. So I think it's just a little too much constriction for these, and they might like something in the 680 range. But at the end of the day, it's a usable pattern, but it's far from perfect as well. And here's the wad out of that shell. These do have a wad and they are buffered, but they are not a plated pellet. But this wad definitely got torn up quite a bit, which doesn't surprise me. That Carlson's Coyote choke does have small ports in it, which could have caught a little bit on some of these. And 1 buck going through a 665 is going to be pretty aggressive, so this doesn't surprise me at all. And it probably helped lead to why we saw some stringiness in the pattern. The wad just kind of ripped itself apart right as it exited the barrel, but there's nothing stuck down in there, if that's worth anything here. Either way, definitely a banged up wad, but not surprising considering what we tried to do with it today either. Alright y'all, well, what do you think about those results right there? I think it's pretty middle of the road. This combination could have gone either way, and we definitely tightened up the overall size of the pattern from what we had been seeing out of these Super X 1-buck shells. So we moved in the right direction, but I just think it's a little too much constriction for them. We saw several pellets right up there at the top that started to bunch up in a nice tight group, but it kind of just blew the edges a little bit there, which leads me to believe that these might like something in the 680-ish constriction range, an extra full or something like that. So we're just going to have to try it and see. Either way, it's a usable pattern the way it is. It's not terrible. It's far from the worst we've seen, but it's not perfect either. But I guess leave all your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Super X 1-buck shells or run a 1-buck shell through a tight choke like that? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? And what other loads and choke combos do you want to see with either these Super X 1-buck loads or that Carlson's Coyote choke? Leave all your thoughts about it down in the comments. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.